Welcome to episode 13 of the Carnism Debunked podcast. Today, I'm joined by the notorious Tash Peterson. You may know her on social media as Vegan Booty. Tash is an Australian animal liberation activist who is no stranger to our TVs and phone screens, for she is constantly the recipient of media attention. She is well known for her solo disruptions, where she enters sporting events or premises selling animal bodies and causes a stir. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to having a chat with her today, and I'm grateful she's come on. So, Tash, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So, you're always in the wars, aren't you? You've had a court case recently. I'm sure one of several court cases you've been involved with. Can you tell us about your most recent court case that I've been seeing on your Instagram and stuff?
Yeah, so I just attended court a few days ago, and this was actually for a protest that I did about 18 months ago now. So it happened quite a while ago, and it's been kind of going through the court ever since. And I finally gone to trial just on Tuesday because I'm pleading not guilty to a charge of disorderly conduct. So basically, they're trying to get me for disorderly conduct for multiple reasons. But I believe the main reason is because I actually did that protest topless. I was dressed as a dairy cow, and the purpose of the protest was to highlight the atrocities occurring in the dairy industry. And I thought using my body was very symbolic to those atrocities, hence why I was topless and had body paint over me with the markings of a cow. And yeah, I was speaking pretty loudly. You know, I'm a disruptive activist, as you said. So basically, I'm being charged for offensive language by speaking the truth about what's happening in the dairy industry. They're subjected to rape and murder, and apparently those words are offensive. And they are saying my conduct was offensive, and the main reason is, yeah, because apparently a topless woman is offensive. So yeah, I received a fine. I think it was in January 2021. So that was 1 month after this protest. I could have just paid the $200 fine for disorderly conduct, and I knew that was completely wrong and I shouldn't be giving into this system. And that's why it's proceeded through the court, and I'm pleading not guilty to it. And now I'm facing criminal charges and a much bigger fine for it.
Wow, and it just shows how authoritarian things are getting as well. I say are getting, actually, it might have even been worse with regards to some animal rights stuff earlier, because at least the world is kind of warming more now to animal rights and that kind of thing. But I mean, just the thing specifically I'm talking about is the thing about the language. They're calling it offensive language. It's not like you went in and shouted at anyone, "You're a fucking this or that." All you just said was, like, I've seen your disruptions, and you don't, it's not like you point at people and start calling them like names or anything like that. You're literally just walking in and saying what's happening to these animals. And that's basically all you did on this last protest.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just there to speak the truth. I'm not there to point the finger at anyone. I'm just there to, yeah, raise awareness about the animals, and I'm just speaking on behalf of the animals to everyone there. And the interesting thing with this protest, I mean, a lot of people will confront me when I'm protesting. They'll get really triggered and aggressive. But this particular protest, no one even seemed that bothered by it. So that's just sort of working in my favor anyway. People were just filming me or just going on with their shopping. So the public reactions to this particular protest show that I definitely wasn't offending anyone, but the police are still taking me to court over it. And the amount of resources they're using over this is astronomical. It's insane.
Well, I'm wondering then, because I don't know how the Australian court system works, but in the UK, one of the key things to actually pushing a trial through to making it for the courts actually making it happen is that it has to be in the public interest. And what you'll find in the UK is a lot of court cases will get dropped because they'll just say, look, the public don't really give a shit about this case. Basically, it's not in the public interest to prosecute in this case. Is that the same in Australia?
Look, I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think so. I mean, the interesting thing with my case was one of my lawyers found out some inside information, and apparently the prosecution, which is the West Australian Police, were having a vote onto whether they believed my behaviour was disorderly or not. And apparently it was 50-50. So they went ahead and prosecuted me. And my lawyer also said that they were sort of discussing how they didn't have enough evidence as to whether they could, you know, prove that I was disorderly, and he thought that it may have been dropped. But surprisingly, it's still going ahead. And I think that's because they really want to stop me. Because, I mean, I have other court cases coming up for the same sort of thing. And as I said, they're putting a huge amount of resources into prosecuting me.
Well, the whole offensive language thing, it's so subjective anyway. I mean, how can you prove exactly what does that even mean, offensive language? And would they, how consistent is their application here? I mean, if you were protesting about human rape and human murder, they wouldn't say you can't use those words. So it does seem like a bit of a, from what it sounds like this is a pretty weak case against you, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that's what makes the whole justice system, ironically, so unjust. I think particularly in Western Australia, it's just so conservative. I mean, in the legislation, you look at what disorderly conduct is considered to be, and it says using insulting, offensive, or threatening language, or a combination of both, or insulting, offensive, or threatening conduct. So I mean, of course, people are going to be insulted and offended, and they may even feel threatened by what I'm doing and saying, but that shouldn't take away my rights to speak up the truth and be charged for it. I mean, I've been doing this sort of activism for at least a couple of years now, but the only 2 occasions where I've actually been charged for disorderly conduct happen to be the only protests I did topless. So that's what makes me think is it really is coming down to the fact that I was topless, and they're just trying to use other things against me and say, oh, well, we're not picking on her because she's a female. Let's just say her language was offensive. You know what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. That could be the case. And it kind of just shows, actually, because the whole thing as well about the language stuff, and about, you know, you just mentioned there a moment ago, well, of course, some people might have felt insulted or offended, blah, blah, blah. But that's kind of how we do feel when someone presents us new information that goes against our beliefs, cognitive dissonance, right? Because that's how I felt. I remembered when I first watched Gary Yourofsky's speech, which was the speech that changed me all those years ago. So I saw his speech in 2012 and went vegan after watching that. And yeah, of course, he was there, like up in front of all those people, calling it rape, calling it the animal holocaust, calling it murder. I wasn't comfortable with this, and of course I felt kind of insulted by this, but it's like secondhand offense, right? It's just like the person literally just saying what's happening. And you, like in your case, you weren't literally jabbing your finger in people's faces kind of thing. You were literally just saying, look, this is what's happening, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's just crazy that this is going through court.
Yeah.
You know, it's really symbolic to the so-called freedom of speech that we're supposed to have in Australia, and it's just being completely taken away.
What was your experience recently with anti-terrorism police? I heard about that. I think it was like via David Rams or something. Did you want to talk to us about, because this is a big scary word, right? Anti-terror police. Clamp down on Tash Peterson, the big terror threat, who's the danger to the West. So tell us what happened there.
Yeah, well, firstly, I wouldn't be surprised if I were actually on the terrorism list. And I must be, because the anti-terrorism police came knocking on my door to issue me with the disorderly charge. So that's not for the court case that I just recently have. This is the other disorderly charge I was talking about, which I actually will be appearing in court in less than 2 weeks' time. This is a 2-day trial.
Right.
And some reason they sent the anti-terrorism police knocking on my door to issue me the summons for this charge. I believe that this is just an intimidation tactic. I don't know what the hell they're trying to do. But again, I'm pleading not guilty to that. So that's why it's going to trial.
I mean, it almost sounds like fucking satire, right? Because I see when you're on your posts, Tash, right? Whenever you post on Facebook or Instagram, anything, you get all the like Australian like meatheads there in the comments, like, you're a fucking terrorist, mate. And it's kind of like they're blatantly, it's like they're acting on that, right? It's like an intimidation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
exactly. It's insane. Absolutely insane. But I think at the end of the day, it's just showing that it is working. I mean, it's not intimidating me, but you know, if they are feeling so threatened by the truth that I'm speaking, that they're gonna send them to my door, you know, trying to charge me to stop me and put me off. No way. And I think it's so important that I do plead not guilty to these charges.
100%, because you're not guilty. And this is an interesting conversation to have actually about the whole freedom of speech stuff, because like me, you've been censored on social media, haven't you?
Yeah.
What happened with your like TikTok account and stuff? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I lost my TikTok account, or I think it's just over a year ago now. I was getting so much traction on there. It was definitely the best performing platform in terms of reach to a non-vegan audience. I think I got up to about 180,000 followers on there. I think one of my videos had 15 million views, which literally sent thousands, if not tens of thousands of people to watch Dominion. And I was so upset when that account was taken away from me for no apparent reason, apart from a lot of people obviously wanted to mass report me, and TikTok had just taken that down. I actually got in contact with a person from TikTok. I have no idea how, but I actually did. And she said, no, sorry, you violated the guidelines. We're not giving you your account back. But my account actually popped back, and I had it for another few weeks, and then it was taken away from me again. And I haven't been able to get it back since. I haven't even been able to use the platform since, because what's happened is every new account I make, it will either get taken down or it will just be permanently banned from posting. So I actually recently started up a TikTok account pretending to be a hater of myself. And it's getting some good views, and I'm just pretending I hate myself, but it's still getting that message out there. I'm still getting my protests out there. So that seems to be working at the moment.
Well, you might have to just drop me a message like after the show saying, yes, by the way, George, this account is definitely not Tash Peterson, and you should definitely maybe not follow it, hint, hint. But you know, I think of all the social media platforms, TikTok is the fucking shadiest, and that takes some doing, because my God, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter are fucking shady, right, with their censorship stuff. What's crazy about TikTok is there seems to be a lack of accountability with the censorship. And what I mean by that is, let's say Facebook bans a massive page, right? I mean, for example, not that I'm saying that vegan teacher is like as well known as Donald Trump, for example, but when Facebook did like ban Donald Trump's account, or anyone, like, it doesn't have to be someone as well known as Donald Trump, like whenever they censor someone with a huge following on their thing, they give some kind of reasoning to the media that has to actually go, because people ask questions like, so, wait, hold on, why did you just ban this account? And Facebook or Twitter or whoever will say, we did this because, and they will release some kind of statement. TikTok doesn't do that. They're very shady, and we just don't know their reasoning. Like, that vegan teacher had nearly 2 million followers on TikTok. So this was probably the largest animal rights account by a solo activist actually on any single platform. I don't think there's another like solo activist who has that, whose content is solely dedicated to animal rights, who has that many followers. And what annoyed me is I even saw vegans kind of like being apologists for her ban and kind of like theorizing why it was. It's like, oh, well, she did this, so that's why it was. And it's like, how the fuck do you know? TikTok didn't even say anything. Like, what were your thoughts on that, about that vegan teacher's ban from TikTok?
Yeah, it came pretty closely after I lost my account. And it just seemed to be a numerous amount of animal rights activists on the platform that just suddenly lost their account all within that short period of time. And there was just no reason for it. And yeah, it was sad seeing so many vegans actually celebrating her losing her account.
Ah,
I was
it's
just in
crazy.
disbelief of that. I was just like, we've just lost, you know, possibly the most powerful activist on social media ever. We've just lost her account and you're celebrating this. This is such a huge loss for the animals.
It's insane. And look, you don't even need to agree with every single thing a person posts. I mean, for God's sake, look at my account. Like, a lot of vegans don't agree with a lot of stuff that I say and stuff, but to to actually support big tech censorship of animal rights pages is crazy. And you're right, it seemed very conveniently timed, didn't it? It was like almost this sort of coordinated attack on animal rights pages. And I think
Yeah.
mine was one of them as well. My account did get banned on TikTok around that same time, and I even got a video permanently deleted for sticking up for that vegan teacher. Literally, I didn't say anything bad in the video. I just said that vegan teacher has been banned. This is terrible, blah blah. Here's why. And I think that the worst thing I said in it is like, it's hypocritical for you to say that she should have been banned for this if you say this, whatever it was. And my video got banned for that, and my account got perma-banned for it. But then I somehow managed to get it back via an appeal. But obviously, many people, such as yourself and such as Miss Katie, weren't so lucky. But do you know what also annoys me, Tash? It goes beyond vegans celebrating like when vegan accounts are taken down, which is the most pathetic thing, obviously. But I don't like it even when vegans celebrate when any kind of account is taken down, unless it's like extreme, like there can be extreme exceptions, like say fucking ISIS or something are posted on Twitter, or right, whatever. But I'm just
Yeah.
talking about social media censorship in general. Does it annoy you too when you see vegans say, even let's say it's a politics or something, like, what are your thoughts when people were like, oh, haha, that's a good thing that, I don't know, Donald Trump got banned off Facebook, or haha, that's a good thing that so-and-so whose opinion on this I don't like. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think, do you support any of those kind of bans, or do you think it's all kind of bad?
Yeah, I feel like I'm on the same page as you. I think everyone has the right to use a platform to speak freely. And yeah, obviously, in some circumstances where there's severe harm involved or violence, then sure, I think maybe at that point in time, depending exactly on the circumstance, then maybe their accounts should be banned, of course. But yeah, everyone has the right to speak up their beliefs, and we shouldn't be celebrating censorship.
Exactly. I don't think many vegans realize just what a dangerous road it is when you support censorship of anything. Okay, there's a politician with an opinion you don't like or about something, or he has controversial views about this or that. But don't you realize that by banning their account, it sets a precedent where these companies are so fucking powerful, right? And what makes it scary is they control the global spread of information. The, you know, Meta, as they're called now, who are Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Google, sort of in collab there, TikTok and stuff. They control the global spread of speech and information. The minute vegans start celebrating when they're banning, like, you know, opinions they don't like and stuff, what the hell? That is a very dangerous precedent for our movement. Don't people realize that the people who own these platforms aren't vegan, and they're even hunters like Mark Zuckerberg? Like, do they not realize just how bad this is? That because essentially they could just ban us for something, saying stuff that they don't like one day, right? You know, Zuckerberg could just say, oh, Tash Peterson said something mean about hunters. Bye bye, Tash. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it goes the other way around too. I mean, yeah, and kind of going back on that as well, I did also lose my Instagram account last year. And I
Jeez.
think I'm on the verge of actually losing my current one. And I mean, I went from having Instagram for, I think I got it, you know, well over 10 years ago now. So I had the same account for so long, no form of violations whatsoever. But then suddenly I just got bam, bam, bam within the period of a few months, like 4 or 5 violations, which I knew weren't going against the community guidelines, and then my account's gone. Like and that was a journey. That's the documentation of my activism. It's not like, oh no, I lost my social media. That is part of my work as an activist, and I just lost that before I could blink. So that was really upsetting. Thankfully, I've been able to grow this one back, but as I said, like suddenly in the past couple of months, again, I'm getting violation after violation, and I'm just not sure when I'm going to lose this one.
Yeah, any vegans listening, please stop hanging yourself with your own noose. It's not good to support social media censorship of any kind, and vegans are going to be the group most impacted by this, because the minute they say, oh, you're sharing offensive videos that, you know, people might not like, boom, the dairy industry wins, the egg industry wins. And this could be the downfall of our movement, social media censorship, right? Social media has been the most powerful tool, I think, in growing veganism across the world. You know, I'm ashamed to say, and I don't know if it's the same for you, Tash, but I wouldn't be vegan if it weren't for social media. I'd be eating a Big Mac right now. We would never be speaking to each other. It was just by chance, sheer chance. I was scrolling through my Facebook one day in 2012 that JME, who's the grime artist that I listened to, shared Gary Yourofsky's speech. Was it the same for you? Did you go vegan because of social media, or was it something else?
Kind of. I actually have an interesting story as to how I became vegan after many coincidences. I happened to be traveling in Hawaii, where I was couch surfing with a group of random girls from Europe. And one of them was giving out her Netflix details, and I was really cheeky, and I saved her Netflix details in my phone because I'm just not someone to pay for a Netflix subscription, no way. So once I got back from that holiday, I was actually using Netflix on this random person's account, and that's when I watched the documentary Food Choices, and I literally went vegan overnight. So thank God that I took someone else's Netflix details.
How dare you
watch this documentary?
We're gonna have to rescind your veganism now. It was you did it via unethical means. You did it from rinsing someone else's Netflix account. Well, you're obviously a fake vegan, Tash, and we can't have you. Don't you know that we don't steal things that belong to others, Tash?
Hey, it was just sharing the platform without them knowing that I was sharing it with them, really.
It's like when Carnage say, no, it's in symbiosis. It was a symbiotic relationship between you and the...
Yeah.
Wow.
That's it.
No, that is a good little story. And yeah, no, there we go. So there we are. The proliferation of media, whether it's social media or other means, that's what it is that's turning most people worldwide.
Exactly.
I wanted to talk now about some more controversies you've faced, but this is from fellow vegans, right? The whole lingerie protest stuff. I've seen you doing them with Stefania and stuff in Australia. Describe what it is that you're doing, and when, because people listening might say, "Oh, lingerie protests, what that?" Describe what lingerie protests are and why you think that they are effective.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll just give a bit of background as to how we actually came up with the idea, because initially it wasn't actually intended to be a protest. So for those who don't know, Stefania's a famous Australian model. She has over 1 million followers on her Instagram. She's a lingerie model. So lingerie is, you know, her thing. And I was fortunate enough to fly over to Melbourne and stay with her for, I think it was about 6 weeks. And she said, oh, cool, why don't we actually do a photo shoot in lingerie holding animal rights signs? Stefania's played quite a powerful role in the body positivity movement, and she has found like using her body and photography has been a really powerful thing to initiate a movement. One photo of her actually initiated the whole kind of plus size model movement. I hate using that word, but you know what I mean, like all sizes in models, which is so amazing. So she just sort of wanted to play on that idea with animal rights, getting, you know, some cool photos and spreading that message. And when we went out to get photos in the streets with the signs, we sort of thought, wait, this is an awesome opportunity to actually not only go out there just for photos, but to actually engage with the public and do a bit of activism with it. And we eventually got other people involved who either joined in with us, or we're just out, outreaching with people coming in to take photos with us. So it kind of evolved from that idea of just taking a few photos to share on social media and get that message out there, to actually becoming a form of activism by engaging with the public. Because, I mean, it was definitely a different form of activism to what I'm used to. I'm used to people sort of reacting very aggressively to me, and of course, like, that's a good thing, that shows the message is getting to people. But this was something different. I mean, most people were responding in a really positive manner. They wanted to come and talk about animal rights, they wanted to take photos of us, and I think overall it was a very successful protest, not only in that moment of reaching people, but also in the form of social media with the photos and videos that we got for that protest.
Yeah, because here's the thing, no one can deny that they get media attention and stuff, right? Those protests that you do, it sells, right? They say sex sells, and there's some women, in the street protesting, wearing their lingerie and stuff, and it turns heads, people take pictures, it goes up on social media, the papers take notice of it. But what do you say to, like, those people who make the argument that it somehow trivializes the animal rights cause, because they say, oh, you wouldn't protest, I don't know, sexual abuse of children or something by going out wearing lingerie or something like that. Do you have counter arguments to when people say that?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest argument to it is, well, you're sexualizing your body and you're sexualizing the message. And it's like, hang on, I'm just wearing, some clothing. Like, just because I put lingerie on doesn't mean I'm suddenly sexualizing myself. It's just to get attention. I mean, I can wear whatever I want when I protest, but it's obvious that it gets attention because it's different. You don't see people out in lingerie every day. It's going to grab attention to that. And I think it's just another way of getting the message out there. And I think it definitely works. I mean, we have so many different forms of activism. I think it's so important to be, expanding on that, or not just looking down one pathway saying, oh, this is the only type of activism we should be doing. We're going to be reaching people in all different forms of activism. And I think this definitely reached a lot of people. And I have proof that people actually messaged me saying, I saw you in person protesting in your lingerie, or I just saw a photo of you online in lingerie. And it's honestly made me go vegan because of the message on the sign. It made me look into it. So it definitely was successful.
Yeah. And just on that subject there of, like, effective forms of activism and stuff, let's talk about the one that you're well known for, which is disruptions. How effective are disruptions? And, because people often, usually the critique comes at, like, DXE, right? People say, DXE, are they effective? I don't know. And this kind of stuff. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with disruptions, actually, describe what a disruption actually is with regards to animal rights activism. And let me know your thoughts on whether or not they're effective. I mean, obviously you do think they're effective because you do them. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, I guess everyone sort of has their own perception on disruption. I guess my disruptive activism has evolved a lot since the very first disruption I did. And I would barely call my first disruptive protest a disruption anymore, because my activism has evolved that much. But it can honestly be as simple as going into a supermarket and holding a sign and even being completely silent. I mean, you're still causing some disruption because you're going in a place to spread a message. And that's exactly what it is, like going into these places, whether it be a supermarket, shopping center, anywhere where animal abuse is being sold or is occurring, and just trying to take some form of disruption. So obviously for me now, that's going into these places, speaking as loudly as I can, and using creativity in my protests as well, to bring even more attention to that message. And yeah, I definitely believe it's one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful forms of activism, because what it does is it will often get that media attention and put it into public dialogue. And I mean, through some of my disruptive protests, I've been able to reach people literally across the globe with a message. And I don't think there's any other form of activism that's able to do that. Of course, there's a few exceptions. We have obviously people like Earthling Ed and Joey that are outreach activists, and they've been able to get themselves on massive platforms and reach people across the world. So there definitely are a few exceptions. But for me, it can take me literally 3 minutes to go inside a shopping center and cause a disruption, and I'm able to reach people around the world with that message. And we're talking like millions of people, thanks to the media attention. And it just sparks that conversation about animal rights, and it sparks a lot of people to look into why I'm doing that. And quite often I'll get messages from people saying, you initiated my interest in watching Dominion and now I've gone vegan. So I think it's definitely a very effective form of protest.
This is the thing. I don't think people should shy away from controversy and stuff. Anything that you feel confident doing that gets a message out there and gets attention, I think it's worth doing. Let me tell you a little story about something that just happened to me the other day. In fact, you may have seen it because I haven't stopped banging on about it on Instagram. But I consider this the single most effective piece of activism that I've ever done. So I'm still buzzing from the high of it. But a certain activist, who shall not be named on the podcast, refused to go on a big YouTube channel run by this guy called David Nino Rodriguez, right? He's like a sort of patriot, conservative, Republican, that kind of YouTuber. He's got a big audience, like 200 and something thousand maybe subscribers on the platform. And this certain vegan animal rights activist refused the opportunity to go on his show and talk about animal rights, to talk about the animal holocaust and expose these industries on his channel to his non-vegan audience of hundreds of thousands. And the reason, Tash, for not taking him up on the opportunity to go on was difference in political opinion. And he posted this pathetic status saying like, no, I will not go on your bigoted talk show or whatever it is. Veganism is not a safe space for bigots and stuff. I obviously didn't get this message across strongly in my work that veganism is intersectional. It's about ending all forms of human injustice. So when I heard about this, Tash, naturally, I jumped at the opportunity and said, get me on the fucking show. And I went on, I revealed the truth of the animal holocaust to his audience. And it turned out this guy, David Nino Rodriguez, he was very, very much affected by what I showed him. And he said, he ends the show by saying, wow, you know what, George, I'm going to have to start making some changes. And he was visibly upset by the footage. And his audience, like, remember, these are all the flag waving Republicans and stuff that intersectionals hate. They were in the loads of comments saying, wow, I'm going to have to take a good look at my life now and change. It's crazy that he refused the opportunity to do that. And Tash, honestly, looking at the comments and how many people I reached just by doing it, that was the single most effective piece of activism that I have ever done. So that kind of, that reminds me about what you're talking about, the disruption stuff. It's like, look, don't shy away from something just because people might think, oh, that's controversial or that's bad. If you want to end the animal holocaust, we've got to take every opportunity to do that, right?
Exactly. And I honestly believe the more controversial it is, the more powerful it can be. I mean, it seems to consistently be more effective. I mean, yeah, the most controversial protests I've done have certainly been the most effective. And I think that's so awesome that you got that opportunity. And I just can't believe someone on behalf of the trillions of animals in this Holocaust would not take that opportunity to speak up for them. And just judging someone based on what they think of them is, I'm in disbelief.
It's insane, Tash, and I'll tell you who it was after the podcast, and I'll share the video as well. But trust me, you will be very, very disappointed when you find out who it was. But it's just crazy, isn't it? Because people say animal liberation by any means necessary, and then they say, "Oh no, I wouldn't do that." oh no, don't go on that
Yeah.
podcast. And this person's like, yeah, definitely sticking to your principles there of by anything's necessary.
Yeah.
What do you think are the main problems facing the animal rights movement right now? What are the main problems that you see for us in the movement?
Uh, I see a lot of separation and
Mm-hmm.
too much like infighting. And
Mm.
that's part, like a lot of those issues are one of the reasons why I go out and just do activism by myself. I sort of started off working within a group, and everything was so good. They all became my best mates.
Yeah.
And I sort of started, I this was sort of on my journey to sort of becoming more of a disruptive animal rights activist. And I'd always proposed these ideas, and they'd sort of just been looked past, and they'd always want to do things that just didn't make sense to me, which is fine. Everyone, do something, that's completely fine. But I just didn't understand why they were sort of just putting off my ideas, like, nah, that's not a good idea. And
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly why, as I said, I just go out and do my own thing now, which is a shame, because if we all just united together in numbers, I just think it would be so much more powerful. And I don't know if it's just happening in the community here, or I sort of see it and hear about it happening in other places. But yeah, there's just too much judgments amongst one another. And like, I
Yeah.
get messages all the time from vegans and even other activists saying, you should be ashamed of yourself. What you're doing is causing problems. Like, you're causing more harm than good. And then I ask them, where is your evidence? Because I literally have hundreds of messages from people around the world saying that I made them go vegan. So I have my evidence right there.
Mm.
Can you show me your evidence to say how I'm causing this harm? People can have their opinions. They can say if they don't like my activism, whatever, but don't go out and say that I'm causing harm. Don't try and discredit other activists. Like, I'm just seeing too much of that. And I think that's probably the biggest issue that I'm seeing.
Oh, you know what? It's crazy that, and usually the people who are most vocal when it comes to criticizing other forms of activism, they're not really doing anything themselves. Like, the main person I always noticed that with was Gary Yourofsky, right? Everyone, was a hater on Gary Yourofsky for this, that, and the other. And it's like, no offense, but you're literally criticizing probably the person who's changed more people than anyone. And it's like, with all due respect, what the fuck have you actually done? And you're sitting there just like pointing your finger at Gary Yourofsky, like the guy who's responsible for, he could have converted literally millions of people. Like, me and you are sitting here, and we're proud of ourselves because maybe we've convinced a fair few people, and that's amazing work that you've done with getting these hundreds of messages. But holy shit, like Gary Yourofsky, like, I can't even fathom the number of people that he's converted due to his speech. And he's one of the people who I think lit that match, actually, that sparked the modern vegan movement, because that speech, I think, that resulted in, I think, a sort of tidal wave of other kind of activist stuff coming out that normalized veganism. Do you get what I'm saying?
Definitely. Yeah, he's played a very significant role in this entire movement. And yeah, it's always the ones that don't seem to be doing anything, that just sit back and criticize. And I
Mm,
think it's sort of like they do it maybe because they feel guilty. Some of them genuinely may think that
yeah.
a certain activist is doing something harmful for whatever reason. And I understand why some people might think disruptive activism is causing harm, because,
Mm-hmm.
I did once question it before I became involved in it. But despite that, I think, yeah, it's sort of just a reflection upon themselves. Like, maybe they feel guilty for knowing the truth and not, standing up against it. So they let it out on activists and say, oh, well, they're causing harm.
Yeah. Now, you won't be surprised to know that I'm going to mention this topic now, because, people probably think, fucking hell, George, you're a bit obsessed. But I do like to ask my guests about it. Like, what are your thoughts on like intersectionality and the sort of conflating of human issues with animal rights issues? I mean, is it even a conflation? I mean, you might say, well, George, humans are animals or something. So like, what are your thoughts on intersectionality within the movement? Like, should the movement just be about non-human animals, or do you think it has its place and has its merit?
It's a very good question that sometimes I find difficult to answer because, I mean, on the outside, intersectionality just seems very well and good. I mean, yeah, we're all animals at the end of the day. But then I, come across these people that are really so-called passionate intersectionals, like animal rights activists. And I hear them say things like, we shouldn't be calling it a Holocaust for the animals.
Yeah.
And all of this comes into it. And I'm just in absolute disbelief. These are people that have been inside these places, created documentaries and exposed the animal Holocaust. And they're coming out and saying, we shouldn't be calling it Holocaust. We shouldn't be calling it rape.
Oh, gee, I wonder who it is you're talking about there. Sorry, carry on. Sorry, continue.
You shouldn't wear a shirt that says Dominion on it if you're attending a freedom rally or something like that.
Could that be? Sorry.
And that is what I'm in absolute disbelief about. I just don't understand how someone who has witnessed these atrocities can come out and say that we shouldn't be using that language, or you can't wear this shirt because your views are different to mine outside of animal rights.
This is the problem, Tash, and I think I don't want to tar every intersectional with the same brush, but I think a lot of them have become so deep into this whole woke thing that they're sucked into a cult. And I've done a Patreon only podcast episode of this. So for anyone listening now, if you're a Patreon supporter of mine, you can check it out. It's an earlier episode I did called Leaving a Cult, where I talked to someone who was formerly, sort of brainwashed and deep into that kind of stuff before she kind of saw the light, so to speak, and now realizes just how deep she was in that and how destructive it was. But it seems to me, Tash, it's almost like, when like you said, right, when you hear what intersectionality is about, it sounds fantastic, doesn't it? Oh, it's just about solving all forms of oppression and realizing that all forms of oppression are interconnected and blah, blah, blah. I mean, this sounds fantastic on the surface, but then you scratch the surface. And to me, it seems like kind of a religion of self-hatred, particularly if you're a white male or something and you've undertaken this kind of stuff, because it's very much this thing about bashing white men and calling, like, if there's a form of veganism they don't like calling it a Holocaust or something, or they deem something sexist, they call it white veganism. What the fuck is white veganism, and why are you associating the term white to mean like negative? Like, what are your thoughts on that term, white veganism? Do you know, have you seen people use that term?
I've seen people use that term and I have no understanding why. I don't get it.
Yeah. No, it's totally a cringe and hateful term. And I don't think they even understand it themselves. The thing is with cults is that people don't really say these things. They haven't thought these ideas up themselves. They say these things and have these beliefs because other people have told them to say it, or other people have told them to believe this. It's a lot of people who have these kind of political views, they think they're being sort of radical and stuff, and that they're unique and they're going against the status quo and stuff. But I think they're just the biggest puppets out of everyone. You get what I'm saying? And they just sort of parrot they parrot whatever the media kind of like want them to say. They conform to what others just tell them to do. There's a video I did on it recently, actually, just called Veganism Bad, which talks about these kind of people, but this was about anti-vegans in particular. But it's such a shame that it's crept into now into sort of the animal rights movement. But I'd wanted to move on now just to ask you, with regards to like the media kind of stuff, why is it that you in particular get so much media attention? Why is that?
I actually don't know. That's kind of a difficult question to answer, to be honest. I mean, I think possibly because the moment I sort of stepped out and just started doing activism by myself, it just seemed to grab media attention. And I'm not entirely sure if it's because of multiple reasons. It could have been coincidence. It could have been the fact that I, just a single activist is out there doing something so disruptive. I think they really grabbed onto that.
Yeah.
And also the fact that I used creativity in my protest. So my very first big kind of media grabbing protest was just over 2 years ago now. And that's when I dressed in the slaughterhouse costume. And I think that, with the combination of me just doing it by myself, really grabbed media attention, and I could see how effective it was. And then I just sort of continued with my consistency of unique kind of creative protest and just going out and doing my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of resulted in them creating that narrative about me. And it just sort of led from there, really. And maybe because I live in Perth as well and nothing much happens here, so everyone gets excited when I do something.
Yeah, so where is most of the sort of activism at in Australia? Would it be places like Melbourne and Sydney?
Well, go back a few years, and yeah, it definitely was. I mean, I remember sort of getting into the activism scene 4 or 5 years ago and seeing the stuff going on in Melbourne and thinking, wow, that's incredible. But it's honestly, in the past 2 or 3 years, sometimes I feel like I'm the only person out there, to be honest. I think, Melbourne and Sydney are sort of just coming back, and a lot of people are getting out there again. But yeah, it really died down for a bit. And I just kind of, I don't really know if there's much of a scene anymore.
Yeah. But is it that Perth is particularly bad then for activism, or is it just stuff in general? Is Perth just one of those places where nothing much happens for a city kind of thing?
Yeah, sort of just like that. I mean, there's plenty of awesome activists here. And yeah, even a couple of years ago, we were doing really big group protests, but I don't know, it just sort of comes up and down a bit. But yeah, like Perth in general as a city, there's just not much going on. So maybe I have a bit of a step in that, direction of being able to grab media attention a bit easier, because there's just not as much going on. And then it sort of triggers, and other media outlets around the world kind of catch on to it.
Yeah, I guess that's the way sort of Australia works, because it's so fucking huge, right? But you've just got these cities sort of dispersed along the coastlines, like plane journeys away from each other. So it's like every place has its own little media kind of bubble, and then it just kind of spreads from there. What it's like in the UK though, UK is very small, but extremely densely populated for its size. And so we have vegan activism just all over the fucking place. Like if you look at my God, if you go on the chapter map for Anonymous for the Voiceless, if you look on where all the chapters are in the UK, there's little pins just all over you can't even see the UK because it's just covered in pins from chapters, because it's there's an AV event here. Oh, and then there's one 20 miles on, and then there's 20 miles on and 20 miles on. It's like that. But one of the things that's kind of annoying me with regards to UK media and representation of veganism is that there's so many of us here. There's so many animal rights activists in the UK, but they always choose maybe the same 1 or 2 people just to represent us on TV. Most recently, it would be Earthling Ed. This isn't a jab at Earthling Ed. Earthling Ed is fantastic. He's an excellent advocate for animal rights. We're very, very blessed to have him on the team. But it's UK media is almost acting as if he's kind of the sole voice of veganism, and no one else exists. And it's as fantastic as a job as as fantastic as a job as he does on TV, I would love it if media actually showed that there's more of us than just this one man. And we have fantastic activists all over the UK who would absolutely, lay down truth bombs live on TV. But they always just seem to pick him. Again, not a diss at Ed. Thank you, Ed, for all the great work that you're doing. But I just wish our media was a bit more diverse like that. And I guess in Australia, at least, you've got those different you've got the different stations and stuff all over the country, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just kind of dependent on each city, I guess. I guess it'd probably be the same thing here in Perth is, they try and come and grab onto me, even if
They
I'm
get,
in a
yeah.
big group protest. And it's like, hey, why don't you get everyone else here? Like, and they always try and make it out as if I'm the only person there. So because
Right.
they've played on that narrative.
Right.
Yeah, which is a bit annoying too. So it's sort of similar in that sense, I reckon.
Why is it that you think the media has such an anti-vegan bias? Like, I've noticed this, like on British TV, it's pretty bad. You know, we've got people like Piers Morgan and stuff, although he's left that show now. But, you know, it'd be, you know, vegans are always getting grilled on TV. In Australia, I think it's a bit worse than the UK, actually. Every time I've seen an Australian activist on Australian TV, the presenters are really grilling you as if you've done something wrong, like interrogating you, and just about something that's so basically that should just be such a basic common sense, right? That it's wrong to harm animals. Why is it that the media has this massive bias against vegans? What do you think is their agenda here?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons that come into it. From my personal experience in the media, I guess they sort of, again, playing on that narrative, like, you know, calling me a nuisance, a pest. Sometimes I'm even called a terrorist.
Yeah.
And they're just playing on this because I'm doing something that's either seen as very controversial or just very different. And they sort of want that clickbait and a good article about how I'm apparently harassing people and I'm a pest. Because it's just, yeah, as I said, really good clickbait for them. But yeah, obviously, I think it comes into a bigger picture where, you know, they're involved, you know, interest in animal agriculture and protecting that. And it's kind of unusual because there's one particular media station here in Perth that seem to be like my best friends because they're always there reporting on me. Like they're always the ones that do the news stories about me quite more than any other news station. And I know that the guy who owns this channel has a lot of investments in animal agriculture. But what I've noticed is they seem to still play, or either put the articles and or the news reports in a pretty decent light. I mean, yeah, so, sure, they still play on, you know, that I'm a pest, etc. But they still quote me word for word. They're still putting the message out there.
What?
So it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard someone say that about the media. So that is, maybe there's an interesting shift. Maybe that's because there's some kind of, maybe that person who's doing that, maybe they have ties with Big Broccoli or something like that. And so they actually
yeah, it
want
could be that.
That's the thing with journos. There's always some kind of fucking agenda or something. There's what journalists say and what journalists do are often two different things, which is one of the annoying things for us as vegans talking to the media, because they will often misrepresent us in some way. So that is definitely good to hear about that. But it's interesting, isn't it? It's like, why isn't there even one news anchor in like Australia, the US, the UK? Why isn't there even like one of those people on the news or the morning shows who's like an animal liberation activist? And they get a farmer on and they grill them about why are you doing that to the cows? Don't you know that we should all be vegan? Why is it that like there's so many vegans now, but still there's just no one in the fucking media who is? What is that all about?
Yeah, exactly. If only it were that way to, you know, be just a little bit less biased.
I also do wonder, because I said a moment ago there's so many vegans now, but I also say as well, actually, it's like, are there more than we actually, are there fewer than we actually thought? Because I don't know if you've noticed this, Tash, but I think most of the people who identify as vegan aren't actually vegan. They're just plant-based, or not even fully plant-based. A lot of the people who say I'm vegan will just be like, yeah, I'm vegan. I just eat fish on the weekends and stuff. And, you know, it's like, are we basically overestimating how many vegans there are worldwide because people self-identify incorrectly as vegans? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think you're right. I mean, people still just have no concept of what veganism means, and they
Yeah.
just see it as a diet. So, oh, well, I mostly eat plant-based, but I eat some animals. So, yeah, I will call myself a vegan and identify as that. I mean, yeah, I've come across plenty of people that have done that, and it grinds my gears.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could be it.
Well, it's like, do you know the do you know one of the things to always look out for, right? Any any Facebook group that has vegans and then a location in its name, be it a country or a city or whatever, is always like apologist cancer. Like the vegans in Australia, vegan UK, Bristol vegans. Go in the group and it's like activism is like, oh, you can't do that. Activism, let people eat what they want. And I don't have you noticed like the same things in those groups?
Yes, I mean, there's a couple of groups in particular, like in Australia, where I've joined, wanting to be a part of a community, and I see them posting articles and stuff about me, bitching about my activism,
Oh my god.
and like all these other things,
Says it all.
where they're just being absolute apologists. And I think
Yeah.
you're not even fucking vegan.
Well, have you noticed this, Tash, right? We keep set like, we in the UK, we have this sensationalist stat, like, 7% of British people are now vegan and stuff. And it's like, oh, and then you go to the animal rights march and you see the same fucking faces. Have you noticed that? You walk through the crowd.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, how you doing? Hey, Laura, how are you? Hey, Simon. Hey, Tim, how are you? Kind of thing. As you're just walking through the crowd, it's like, I can see someone I know every 5 steps I take. That's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. The movement should be if there's that many vegans, it should be so big that you walk through a crowd for 20 minutes before you even see one person. If you're seeing someone every single step that you take, that's a bad sign, right? And it does the same happen to you.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think it's actually significantly smaller here compared to where you are, where to the point where you won't even get like a big group of people together. It's really sad. Like, I mean, even sometimes when I've tried to organize group protests, I've literally had one person rock up, no one else.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a bit disappointing in that sense.
So much for the group protest day. Well, Tash, look, we're coming to the end now. So can you just give one final message for any activists listening, vegans listening who are non-active? Can you say something about why they should get active and why it's important for them to be active?
Yeah, certainly. I think that once you know the truth, you really do have a moral obligation to be speaking out for that truth. And that doesn't mean you have to be going out and doing disruptive activism or anything like that. It just means that you need to speak up in one way or another, whether that be social media, ideally getting involved in your local animal rights groups and just do something. I remember, I'm a pretty shy and quiet person. Oddly enough, people don't believe me in that because I go out and do some pretty crazy things, screaming and shouting. But I remember the first moment I finally stepped out of my comfort zone and did an Anonymous for the Voiceless Cuba Truth. And I was really nervous about it. But I am so, so grateful that I took that step and did it. And it's just about taking that initial step and just doing something. And more than likely you'll get hooked. I mean, just use your talents and your interests to your advantage in your activism. If you don't like it, try something else. That doesn't mean activism isn't for you. That just means try something else. Just do whatever you can to speak up for the animals.
Amazing. Thank you, Tash. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to that episode. That was Tash Peterson, Vegan Booty. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. And yes, please remember to get active. And yeah, we will see you next time.